Vince Lombardi, fundamentals win ball games, right? It's like people forget fundamentals. What do we hear, right? People do business with people they know, like, and trust. Well, on these, these people that are out there pitching and they're just throwing at, it's like basically, hey, we're on a first date. Why don't we get married tomorrow? Like, hello.
Your business's success depends on relationships, relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Steve Spiro. Steve launched his first company in advertising right after college. A fourth degree black belt in karate and first degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, Steve also owned his own karate studio. He attributes much of his success to the discipline, work ethic, integrity, and resilience he developed through martial arts. When the economy shifted, Steve transitioned from advertising into sales, a surprising path for an introvert with an art school background. Despite the challenges, he mastered the art of connection, becoming a top sales performer. Now known as the Master Connector with over 30,000 LinkedIn connections, Steve hosts the Master Connector Show, a LinkedIn live broadcast. As a published author and inspirational speaker, Steve empowers introverts to break barriers, connect authentically, and lead with selflessness. Congrats on being the Master Connector, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
I appreciate that, Carl. I self-proclaimed, but I appreciate it. But yes, Steve Spiro, the Master Connector, coming at you live or direct. It's one of my signatures I have to do. So great to
Nice.
be
And
on.
I love that you help people lead with selflessness, and especially in the sales role, there's often, I think, a lack of that. So I'd love to see learn more from you about how leading with selflessness leads to better sales success.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it before we went live, right? It's most sales professionals are thinking about what can I get, and they're thinking about closing a deal. They're thinking about numbers, right? And to me, it's been more of a heart thing. I have an incredible mentor in my life who really shifted my thinking, and I saw how selfless he was, right? And he kind of got me thinking. And one of the books I read was The Go Giver by uh, Bob Berg and John David Mann, and actually I had them on my Master Connector show recently. And
Nice.
it's yeah, but it's all about being able to give first, and being selfless and thinking about other people. I like to say, being others focused. And in the sales world, right? Truthfully, sales has a bad stigma for a lot of people because, number one, if you're thinking about getting into sales, you're like, oh, I don't want to be that pushy sales guy, which I could relate to. I don't want to be that, right? I'm an art guy, as you read in my bio, right? It's, like the last thing I wanted to be was a sales guy because, your typical sleazy salesperson or car sales, or no disrespect. Now there's some amazing car salespeople and insurance salespeople, but you got this bad rap, right? And I was in the copier sales business, right? And they say on the evolutionary scale below the chimpanzee and the orangutan is the copier salesman. So, but did that for a while. But anyway, I've learned that, you know what, if you could learn and understand people's needs, right? One of my favorite books is Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he said, if you find out what people want, they'll move heaven and earth to get it. And so it's first understanding, and you're not going to be able to understand what people need and want if you're not asking questions and curious and want to get to know them and learn about their needs. And then once you find their needs, it's sales, if you will, is simple. It's just, let me just give you what you're looking for, right? Once you figured out what their needs are. So and it's also refreshing. And I think what it does, and one of I love, as an inspirational keynote speaker, I talk a lot about this, right? I speak about how to break barriers, right? Because when you're out there in the sales world, a lot of times what happens is there's barriers, right? The first barrier is actually trying to get in touch with that high level, C-level executive, whatever. And there's a barrier there. And then once you get in touch with them and you're on a call with them or you're in person with them, their arms are folded and they're like, what do you got? With their lip is puckered out and, their scowl on their face, and, and you got to break that barrier. And it's really refreshing when they could see that you really care about them and you really want to know about them, and it breaks the barrier down. And I think it's been incredibly valuable and tool, and not just tool, because tool sounds manipulative. Again, I started by saying it's a heart thing. My heart shifted. And when I learned that, the more I care about people, the more selfless I am, the more others focused I am, the better success I've had. And ultimately, right, I'm a big believer in the law of reciprocity, the law of sowing and reaping. You plant and then eventually you reap, right? You don't go to a fireplace. Hey, give me the fire, then I'll give you the wood, right? You got to put the wood in first and you get the fire, right? And so
Mhm.
by giving and being that go-giver, you're going to get what you could first give. And I think a lot of sales professionals, unfortunately, misunderstand that, and they want to get, and you got to give.
Yeah, I think there's this like I love that explanation there about you got to put wood in the fire first, and I've always heard it as also as you got to it's like you got to put deposits in your bank account first before you can withdraw money from it.
True.
And if you keep removing money, you're going to run out of funds in the account, and it's going to be you lose that opportunity. And I think it's the and especially these days with how much people are sold to by how many people do this the wrong way, or like they try and push the sale so quickly, and a lot of the AI tools and like
Yeah.
technology that allows people to take the same template and spread it like to a bunch of people. And the term I heard for it that I love is pitch slapping, where you basically like
Yep.
you connect with someone on LinkedIn and immediately they send you a thing saying, "Hey, I'm selling this thing. You want to buy it?" And it's like it's obvious they don't care or know anything about you besides that you fit in like a demographic thing that they like a filter they applied for this tool, but there's no real relationship there besides the transaction that they are hoping for.
Right.
And it contributes to this negative stigma around salespeople, and it makes it harder for people who are trying to build these good relationships, because the minute people hear your, like you said, their sales, you get all that baggage applied to what you're trying to do, even if you're going about it from the selfless and giving way. And so it's painful to see how many people shoot themselves in the foot when they're trying to succeed with their businesses by propagating these techniques and strategies that are super easy, but they just don't work.
It'll work. Yeah. You read my mind on the pitch slapping. I was going to say if you didn't, but it's so true. And fundamental, right? I mean, Vince Lombardi, fundamentals win ball games, right? It's like people forget fundamentals. What do we hear, right? People do business with people they know, like, and trust. Well, on these, these people that are out there pitching, and they're just throwing at. It's like basically, hey, we're on a first date. Why don't we get married tomorrow? Like, hello, like, I mean, let's get to know each other first. You think? I mean, I guess the only place that happens is in Vegas, right? Where but other
Yeah.
than that, it just doesn't make any sense. But you got to break barriers. You got to figure out, you got to get to know each other, and it just yeah, you're not gonna. I mean, you may get lucky, but ultimately, it's not about getting lucky. It's about having success, right? And long-term success is you really have to build relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of businesses are seeing now is that they're doing these spray and pray pitch slapping things. And they bring in some clients, but then those clients don't stick around very long. They don't get high lifetime value. They don't. Then their burn rate gets through the roof because yeah, they might have purchased, but they didn't really. They weren't in it for the long haul. It's because they there's like a manipulative sales thing, like there's a FOMO and they bought, but then they aren't really in it for the long haul, for the long relationship, because there was no real like or trust there.
Right.
And I think the our it takes us a certain amount of time to build that trust on like a physiological level, just our brains only work so quickly. And a lot of companies are trying to shorten the sales cycle and shorten their funnels and speed things up faster than humans can naturally build that trust. And so there's this disconnect between what companies expect and with what's physically possible for humans to do when it comes to build relationships. And
Right.
so I think paradoxically, the companies that slow down and give people more time to build these trust and nurture those relationships more in a more natural way and a more giving way and a more selfless way are going to find themselves more successful and growing faster than the competitors that are just basically burning a bunch of bridges and by trying to force people into these relationships that they're not really ready for.
That's right. Yeah, and we know that a lot of business comes through referrals, right? And people aren't going to refer you unless you've done a good job, and they don't want a reputation on the line, right? If you just me focused, transactionally based, people are going to be apprehensive about that. And I think there's also, the know, like, and trust. I think sometimes some sales professionals will have a mistake of thinking the trust piece is knowledge based, and they're information constipation based, right? Where they think, I know a lot of my product they're going to buy from me. No, not necessarily. Right or wrong, in the different sales positions I've had, you know I've never wanted to get too in the weeds about the product. I feel like the companies I've worked with, there's always experts that you could pull in that are really knowledgeable, but I want to know enough, where whatever I'm selling or whatever I'm marketing, whatever it is, that I know how it can help fill a need. But I wanted the focus to be on building that relationship and really, understanding challenges. And now that becomes a consultative sale versus a transactional sale. And I think one of the great books I read is the Challenger Sale, which it really kind of changed the paradigm a bit in terms of really helping people understand what um, the anatomy of a sale, right, and how you can really make it much more effective than the traditional transactional.
Yeah, especially if it's like B2B and it's a big, like a longer
Yeah.
sales cycle, a lot of touches.
Oh yeah.
It's those personal connections, those relationships that keep things moving because if if they don't like you, they're not going to want to go to that next meeting. They're going to find reasons
Right.
to avoid doing the steps to make the process work, and so the deal is going to fall apart.
Yep.
And it's not just transaction's not enough to keep those moving because there's so many moving pieces and so many people involved and so many hoops and so much time that you have to build a personal connection. And so if you're think that trust is I'm just gonna keep spouting all the same features and data and tech about what the your product is, and you're not caring about the other person on who they are as a person, you're just gonna lose them because it'll be obvious that you're not really interested in them at all. You're just trying to close the deal, and that turns people off really quickly.
No doubt. The other thing, I've studied the disc personality. I don't know if you're familiar. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, yeah. And learning and getting and being in tune to what profile style they are, right? Are they a D for driven, I for inspiring, center of attention, fun oriented, C for cautious and calculating, and S for supportive, people pleaser type. And if you get a sense for where they are, if you know what to look for. And the other thing is, people know, like, do business, they know, like, and trust, right? One of the things and reasons why people kind of gravitate to people that are like them is that same premise, right? So if they're fast paced because they're a D or an I, right? You got to bring your pace up a little bit. They're not interested in a lot of detail. If they're an S or C, they're a little more slow paced, and they're probably want if they're a C, they want detail, right? If they're an S, they want to kind of get warm and fuzzy about you and learn about, and they might be the kind of person that you could share that you just came back from Bali and Singapore on an amazing trip, which is what I did. But it depends, right? But you got to be in tune and sensitive to who they are so that they could start to build that trust and that likability.
Yeah, and this ties back in really well about understanding your audience and getting to know them and caring about
Right.
them first and
Yeah.
tailoring your approach to them. Yeah, I think that's a great example of
Yeah.
like something that people can do right away is just to start because there's plenty of ways to kind of I actually know Nancy Zare. She's a great sales coach, but she helps people like with a similar sort of disc assessment thing where you're by looking at people's LinkedIn profiles and kind of doing some research, you can try and figure out what their personality style, their buying style is likely to be. So
Yeah.
that when you first meet them, you're already trying to tailor it to what it is likely to be.
Yep.
And then as you interact with them, as you're actively listening and paying attention, you can refine that more. But if you don't and you just go in with your normal spiel, it's going to come across really quickly that you're not really interested in them, and that's a huge turnoff. And it's so there's I think any sales team or sales manager that wants their team to improve, having them learn like how to spot like the disc traits or some of these other ways of reading people and actively listening should be like essential training for anyone who's in sales.
I agree. Big time. Yeah. It's just, it, yeah. It's funny because I have a friend who I mentor, and I recently, we were on a trip, and I told him a little bit about disc, and he started to like he's a lot of a D, like driven, and he just didn't understand people. Like, why aren't you like me? Like, you should just like, we want to get it, move on. Like, and I'm like, no, not everyone's like that. And I explained it, and light bulb went off for me. I'm like, oh, that's why I'm still single. Oh, that's why I've not never had a really good success in career. Okay, yeah, because you need to understand people, and people are different. And the disc, and I know there's a lot of different ones, that are out there, different personality style things, but I like disc because it's simple for me, and I'm a simpleton, if you will, right? But anyway, it's just we're not trying to label people, right? But it just helps you to better relate. And again, it's all about, getting to know them and helping them with what they need. And if one of the things they need is because quickly that they're not detailed, don't give them a lot of detail, right? But if they're detail oriented, give them the detail. Again, it's all about selflessness. But sometimes it's not cookie cutter. That's the other point I want to make here. It's not a cookie cutter thing. You got to be in tune. That's back to, again, a heart thing, and kind of just, getting a feel for where people are quickly. And that's what I love about, getting to know something like disc.
Yeah, at least it gives you language and some kind of ways to move forward once you're going to get a sense of what people are. But I know disc often is like there's a kind of two different of the four categories that they fit into, and so you can get a lot more nuance than just there's in
Right.
one of these four things.
Exactly.
But again, it's also about just how being in the moment and focusing on what they're saying and how they're responding, and being attentive to their needs and not just sticking to your script or trying to force your way
Correct.
through a pitch.
That's right.
And it comes from that selflessness and not just being focused on what you need, but if you really take time to understand what they're looking for, what their real problems are, one that helps them build that trust quicker anyway, because you're making them feel seen, heard, and understood, and people are craving that. So even if it doesn't work out, then that they might know someone who is interested in what you're offering and could refer you there. But if you just try and force the sale no matter what, and you burn that bridge, then you're turned off from anyone they might know who might be a better fit. So just the approach of focusing on the person across from you and what their needs are, and being attentive and empathetic to them. Not only will it be more likely to help you close the deal in front of you, but you'll get more referrals and connections and support, because people will trust you and like you and enjoy the experience they had, yeah, especially if they're predisposed to thinking that you're going to be forcing a sale down the throat, and there'll be a nice surprise that it didn't happen that way. That'll help you stick out in their mind and be top of mind people that they want to refer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the fun part when you start to get referrals, you start to get people. It's happened to me quite a few times where people have moved on to other companies, or you get a call back and, I know you helped me with this, but I need this, like that's the fun part. That's when really things start to kick off. And, you wonder, there's some guys that have been doing it for 20, 30 years, and, they're massively successful. And, a lot of it is because they've done the right thing, created these massive relationships, amazing relationships, and then just people come to them when they need something because they love the experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Steve. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Steve, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.